What's up, everybody? I'm Jordan Riley. Welcome back to the Fully Vetted Show. Matt Dodge is with me today.
Matt Doje.
Yeah. And
Not a veteran.
no, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and we're just going to talk through some stuff and see if I can answer any questions with my limited knowledge and try to clear some things up and maybe see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm always. So people will come to me, and we got Billy on the ones and twos. Billy, give yourself a little
What's
love
up,
there.
guys?
Man, if anyone belonged behind the camera, well, he's got his own camera too, but Billy Collins. No, so I'll have people ask me, like, hey, as a former athlete, what do you think about this going on? That's being reported on ESPN, right? Because I look through those lens. Obviously, being a former Marine, there's, if you think about it, there's so much stuff that goes on that you probably hear a lot differently. Like, you pick up on differently than just civilians like Billy and I don't. I mean, we have family that served, but we haven't served ourselves. And like we said before the show, you know how the sausage is made, right? So
Sure.
When you hear so and so or such and such is going into Ukraine or this type of tank or whatever, you're like, oh, I know more about that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's really top of mind is this Ukraine conflict,
Yeah.
and there's a bit of skepticism out there in terms of what to believe. We talked about that on Magician the Jock with James Cummings, how much the media plays into it. So maybe what is your interpretation of what's happening? And I think on the last episode with Mikkel Buck, you talked about it's about time for a war. It was almost like
it's kind of common knowledge at this point that the only way the powers that be can make money is when there's a conflict. I mean, you've kind of seen it historically. It's kind of like timed, like we're on a pendulum and the pendulum swings back and forth. And it seems to be that every time we make our way back here, it seems to be that's, you can almost call it sometimes. And I mean, obviously, I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe. I did, my first deployment was over there. I think we talked about it in our very first podcast with each other that, my very first deployment was over to
that's right.
the Eastern European areas, like between Latvia, Romania, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and a lot of those places, and training the NATO side for literally exactly what's happening. And that was when we were kind of gaming the game, and we were.
This isn't a new threat, is what you're saying.
No, I mean, and that's why, like, I don't know every single thing about the nuances of what's going on over there and the history behind it, but I do know that it's been going on for a very, very long time. I mean, longer than a very long time. And the thing is that they've been preparing for something like this, or they've been afraid of something like this for a very long time. So it's been something that, like, even as U.S. military, we've taken it upon ourselves to kind of preemptively go over there and train them for exactly what's happening now.
Almost like they knew it was coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, in the right circumstances, under the right conditions, at the right time, you just kind of it's all chess, and you watch the moves and you counter a move, and for the longest time it's just been a lot of show of force. Like I explained before when we were talking a while back, for anyone watching for the first time, when we were over there doing some training. Just training the guys. We were in Latvia, so we're in a bordering country to Russia.
And maybe before you get into that, maybe just for the new people, when you served, what branch, that stuff, just real quick, because I'm sure there's people that are like, man, who is this guy?
Yeah, sure. So I was a section leader in a combined anti-armor team, and it's called a CAT section, and or CAT team, and combined anti-armor is basically heavy machine guns mixed with anti-armor assets like the Javelin and the Sabre system. And the Marine Corps has infantry battalions, and in every infantry battalion you have line companies, which are they're 0311s and some other MOSs, which stands for like your job.
Billy, I know some of these words.
Yeah. So MOS is your military occupation specialty, I believe, if I remember right. And that just signifies like what your job is, and every MOS has a code, and so every code is a designator for like what your job is, and so every infantry battalion has your regular infantry riflemen, mortarmen, but there's also a weapons company, which is what I was
Similar to like
catching.
every football team has a quarterback, a wide receiver. They're all they're different teams, but they all have the same.
And I would kind of argue that, I mean, it doesn't translate super well to football, but I would argue that like the weapons company was like our special teams. So you had a specific purpose, and you could be utilized for many different things to support the line companies, which was like everybody's always heard in movies of like Alpha Company, Charlie Company, Easy Company if you're going like World War II style. Right. So everyone's heard that, but like Weapons Company would either send permanent members to the line companies for them to have attached all of the time, or we would operate independently as a CAT section, and we would be attached as a section to a line company. And we could do everything from QRF, which is like quick reaction force. So if a line company gets into a decisive engagement, and they're taking fire, they're pinned down, they're having time maneuvering and moving to engage the enemy, we can come in with bigger guns, trucks, mobility.
So basically, you guys have played out a bunch of different scenarios. If this happens, then this.
Sure. I mean, everything from like Kazivac, if there's a casualty, we can roll in with big guns, suppress the enemy, pick up the casualty, treat the casualty, bring it back to, the rear where the casualty can get like a higher echelon of care. So CAT is like everything, even you can dismount, clear buildings. CAT is a really like unilateral, like we're usually like a multi-purpose item.
And how much of this stuff were you, because the U.S. is probably the gold standard in terms of military.
Yeah.
So you were tasked with training a lot of the guys now who they're watching Russian tanks come in.
And the thing is, we got to also observe them and their readiness level. And that was kind of like, when I was over there, it was my first deployment. I was of a lower rank. So I once you reach a higher rank in the military, you're starting to get a little bit more information on what's going on. You're starting to get a little bit more,
a little higher on the food chain.
You kind of you see behind the curtain a little bit as to what's happening.
Yeah.
So being my first deployment, I was newer to the Marine Corps. I think I was promoted there to Lance Corporal, which is an E3. So that's the third rank in. And so again, I wasn't doing a lot of the evaluating, but everyone was watching and seeing what they were capable of doing.
Chain of command is real.
Yeah, and when you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you have a job to perform, and that's your job to perform. The thing that was interesting was just seeing what they had to work with. I just off topic, but like one of the strangest things to me is that like we're in a country, one of the coldest places I've ever been. In fact, the coldest moment of my life was in Latvia. No, excuse me. I think it was Bulgaria, but regardless, same region. Same climate, same terrain.
Similar postcards.
Yeah. And the coldest place I've ever been. And I remember we were performing this.
When you say cold, what do you mean? Like what temperature?
Like I can't say temperature. I'm talking about
50 degrees here, Billy. We're putting a sweatshirt on, and we're like
we're frozen.
We're like, when the hell is global warming going to kick in?
Well, the problem was wind chill. It was like we were in this valley, and the wind was whipping through this valley, and it was so cold. I mean, when I say cold, I'm not talking about like, oh man, it's cold outside, I want to go inside, or I need a big jacket.
You're like, what the?
I'm talking about like,
dangerous.
When is this going to end? Because I'm in pain. I can't sleep. It's so cold. It was so cold.
But in terms of temperature, what?
Negatives.
Everything Celsius.
Negatives. Easily.
Anything negative.
If I'm close to like 25 degrees, I'm not going outside.
Yeah, but like you ever notice when you hit a certain temperature, like anything below that is kind of relative because it's all so cold that it's not much colder. You're still just as miserable and cold. Yeah.
Right.
But it was so strange because these guys were sleeping out. We were staying in the field and these guys were sleeping out there. And their commander, which I thought was just the coolest thing, their commander was bringing them coats and stuff, like not even like military coats, but just coats, just more warming layers. And I mean, we were cold, we were freezing, but we also have a large budget. And that's, I mean, for the Marine Corps doesn't have a large budget.
It didn't make you feel so bad about your budget.
But it was like, after seeing what they were working with, but the fact that they were performing their duties with, that much less kind of helped us, as Marines, like you kind of pride yourself on doing a lot with a little, but at the same time, watching them do it, we kind of had this like mad respect for them because of how much they could do with.
Like, what are we bitching about?
I mean, they were bringing out, they were having to get resupplied on like all their MREs and food and water, and it was being brought to them by like generals and things, like guys riding out in like their own vehicle just to drop stuff off because
You said this is around Latvia, Bulgaria.
yeah, Lithuania, we did it, but I mean the guys that were all there, it was like I mean Germany was there, the British Royal Marines were there, the British artillery, which are bombardiers, or they have a name too, but like everybody, it was all of the. Most of the heavy hitters in Europe, like Britain and Germany, and then all of the Eastern European countries like Latvia, Bulgaria, Poland.
I'm glad you said they drove out because this right here, it looked like they were riding their horses out. And, like, the generals ride their horses
But
out.
I mean,
Like,
that's what they're working with,
small.
basically. If you could paint a picture of it, that's what they're working with. I mean, they're doing a lot with a little.
They're riding goats.
Anything.
And they've got, and so these are the people currently, because when we think of Russia, we think of modern, I just think of a big country that's using a lot of
like a huge conventional.
like knockoff American product.
We would consider them what's called near peer, which means that they are not our peer, but they're definitely a near peer. It's kind of hard to argue that. I guess, I mean, again, this gets more political and budget wise, but the only thing that keeps them from being a peer to our military, it would be money. I think they lack the training, the budget to continue to push more machinery and bullets and missiles. And I mean, we have
which that's our biggest weapon. We're seeing that
Right.
now in terms of sanctions and how well they actually work to change a country's mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. We talked with James Cummings, who said that he brought a really good perspective. It's never as simple as Russia bad, Ukraine good.
No, because I think the thing that a lot of people miss, especially with the narrative that's kind of being pushed about, like, it's like watching a movie and you have to pick a good guy and a bad guy. There's an antagonist and protagonist, and everybody has to watch this story unfold, and we're just going to tell you the story because you're sitting at home watching it. The problem is that the Ukrainian people are caught in something between two bad guys. I don't think at this point, and this is again, I just roll in personal opinion, but I don't think at this point there is a good government. I think we're reaching a point with technology and the fact that we've all had it so good for so long that it's been really easy to manipulate us into believing the good guy is here. What are the 8 most terrifying words you can hear is I'm the U.S. government and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And there's really no. If
It's not as cut and dry as good and bad.
It isn't, because there's a lot of other bad things that happen. I mean, there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of money laundering and there's a lot of bad things that go on in a lot of places. But just like the military, just like pro athletes, just like first responders and nurses, there's always a ton of great people and there's always going to be a few bad ones.
It's the old, hey, it's a good person stuck in a bad system.
Yeah.
And this isn't a beat up on anyone. This isn't hey, we're actually pro Putin, but we're
No.
Basically, I mean,
But we're talking about innocent people who are patriots and have families to keep safe and
there's some
protect.
patriots in Ukraine, man.
I've never.
Did you see that while you were over there? Just how fiercely loyal they are to what we would look at and say, like, this isn't much to be loyal.
Well, I mean, that's
It's
one of the
hometown.
things that their culture is completely different. Like we wouldn't understand. Like as Americans, we probably couldn't even identify with them because they don't have the same desires as we do. They don't have the same wants and needs. They're really not on Wayfair trying to find the next nicest faucet for their
They
bathroom.
don't want 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
I'm sure some do. I mean, but that's kind of a global thing. I think everybody wants to become a stay-at-home influencer.
like Jordan
Yeah.
Riley over here.
But the thing
Jordan
is, like,
Riley.
they just don't have the same goals in life that the Western world has. They live a really simple. It's a really to me personally, like with my desires for my life, the simplicity of their culture and just how
It's almost like spending time with the Amish.
it's like community oriented and they cook together and they live together. They don't need. They're not. I mean, I'm sure around big cities, I'm sure it's a lot different. But in the rural areas, consumerism isn't a thing. If you want something, you make it, or you go trade for it from somebody who makes it, and it's a really
They're
like
almost like 100 years behind. Like if
But
that
right-
stuff was present, it's not. That's what, like the Amish, for example. They have had to intentionally
right.
like at any time they could
Turn the
go
line
do
on.
that stuff. Well, it's like when you watch old movies when they didn't have AC, and you're like, how could they live without AC? And they're like, well, they've never had AC. They
Yeah.
don't know they don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
That's and I'm sure that's true in Russia.
But it's
as well as
interesting though
Ukraine.
because it seems like they're far behind, but it's for some of them it's by choice.
right.
It's like I like this rural, live off the land, be self-sufficient. I don't need to depend on anybody but my
I've seen the
neighbors, my
experiment
family.
in the U.S. We don't want a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, and you gotta kind of admire it because when I'm sure they don't have I'm sure if you look at their little phone screen time thing for most of them it's not 7 to 8 hours a day that they're spending on TikTok and Clash of Clans.
Billy.
They're probably not on level 400 of Candy Crush.
Billy's phone is like, stop watching girls twerking videos on TikTok for go outside.
I love a good twerk.
Now, granted, there's a younger generation there. There's cities and metropolitan areas and places where like it is very modern, but a lot of that area is rural. A lot of them actually farm for a living. A lot of them actually do. I mean, you can kind of appreciate it here where you can go into the downtown areas, but you're not far from the rural areas. And a lot of people still live. A lot of people are farmers and ranchers and people that manufacture things themselves, and they just have a different way of life.
They've got a toughness to them too. I mean, Bill, we talked about that. How you see the videos of the tanks coming in, and whether like we have no way of verifying is that yesterday or is that 10 years ago. But they're riding around on bikes. They're like
it's a natural thing.
Yeah.
Like they see it every day.
Yeah, and that's where maybe I'll get into that a little bit with you.
But first, let me get back to what you were saying about the civilians and stuff with Ukraine and with Russia. And I'm on board with you.
Now, I got to preface though, I didn't do anything in Ukraine. We did all NATO, so I feel like it can be somewhat relative. There's a lot of the same community
right.
culture.
But my thing is that my point on it is that, okay, it's horrible that Putin is doing what he's doing. I mean, I think he's probably a horrible individual.
There's war crimes.
It's
happening. Yeah.
But also, our media has a tendency of glorifying this Ukrainian president like he's some sort of god. Well, you know what? He's the one that poked the bear. He's the one that started talking to NATO and wanted to cut off the pipe of the oil structures, the transportation of oil that we are now dependent on, thank you to whatever the case may be. But it also, we have this glorified view of this, the guys in the trenches with the jacket on and he's got a rifle and he's out taking people out. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he's the best. So when you said there's pick your evils and stuff, I'm kind of on the fence because
it's not as simple as good.
No, that's the thing about being the one in the trench is that you're, and you've actually brought it up a lot more when we talk stories and stuff like that about like you are serving and you are fighting for your country, which is the glorified term for it. But realistically, on the ground, you're fighting for the guy on your left and your right. You're fighting for your brothers. You're fighting for your family. You're fighting for your neighbors. You're fighting
to
for
survive,
or literally to survive. So, but
you're fighting for
meanwhile,
Joe Biden to say Uranians.
But meanwhile, behind the scenes, there's people that are sending you to do things because they have an agenda and they have some reason for it. And they really don't care because realistically, I don't even know if it's smart to say, but like I still remember my DOD ID number. I could rattle it right off, but I was literally just that DOD ID number, to some people.
I know some of those letters. Can you
What's
remind-
DOD mean?
Oh, the Department of Defense. DOD is Department of Defense.
Got it. Yeah,
And
that's what I was
ID,
thinking.
everyone has an
I was
ID.
trying to educate the
Yeah.
audience.
So you're right.
We ask
So
those questions. We ask the questions like that so people that aren't as well.
right, sure, that's smart.
Yeah.
That's
The
what we do.
the DOD ID number is just basically what's on your military ID, and that's like when you fill out forms. It's your military social security number. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but realistically, to some people, and those are usually the ones making decisions, you're just that number.
Your number.
And if they want to, get oil, I mean, it's I don't think there's been a single war that hasn't been fought over oil.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because I mean, you're in the military, or you were in the military. You know the capabilities of the U.S., right?
Right.
You can tell when a team is toying with another opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the goal was to go there, defeat that, and leave,
Yeah.
it could have been done. We saw that when.
Well, and that raises a
ISIS.
lot of questions because Vladimir Putin's a very calculated, educated. He's a military genius. He's very smart with that.
Yeah, KGB.
Yeah, he was a former KGB. I mean, the guy always walks with his gun hand free. Never puts it in his pocket. I mean, he's always thinking about
shirtless.
Yeah.
He is like the definition of masculinity.
But the guy, with the capabilities he has, when you look at, when you hear that, like, they anticipated that the invasion was going to take 72 hours, and they probably anticipated that a lot of civilians were going to back them because they were like, oh, they're going to just be on our side because they know we'll win, or they're loyal to us and they want to be us anyway. Maybe they're delusional, and at the same time, they probably had the fear
they
factor
still have a
of
picture
like,
of Stalin in their kitchen. They're
sure,
visualizing another
visit his
USSR.
body every year. But
Yeah.
the other thing is, I'm assuming what they were thinking was that, we're going to scare the shit out of them, and they know that we're coming, and they know what we have, and they're just going to be like, okay, I'm done.
It's like
I don't want to die.
It's like warm-ups pregame. Like,
Yeah.
you see the team, you're like, oh, you're defeated before it even
I
starts.
think they completely underestimated the patriotism and loyalty that regardless of government, regardless of who's in charge, you have to understand that, like, a lot of veterans can probably speak for this. It's like, I don't care who the commander in chief is. If somebody comes against my country or my family or my town, I mean, you're going to, as whatever wrath I have, I may be a small p, but you're going to get as much as I've got. And I think that they've really kind of like
And the home
shown
that,
the world.
That goes back to what you were saying about you're fighting for the person on your left, your right, your family.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing is that you're in my town, homie.
I was going to say,
Like,
it's,
you're on.
what is that?
I'm
Under
on
Armour?
home field
What is that,
advantage, and
Under
I'm
Armour?
going to stay.
Will you protect this house from Under Armour? Yeah, like there is that. And I forget what book I was reading, but they were talking about that, how difficult, like the home team is always at an advantage.
Yeah.
Because they're fighting for more than just gaining territory. They're trying to keep territory.
Yeah. One of Russia's biggest downfalls is their lack of capability when it comes to combined arms. So combined arms refers to, like, I was in a CAT section. I was in an infantry battalion. So that's Marine Corps infantry. But the Marine Corps also had, at the time, tanks, air assets, artillery, logistics, and all of those. And we used to do all kinds of exercises where we would get together and do all that at once. So you'd have artillery flying over your head, tanks rolling up next to you. CAT was here. The infantry was ahead of us. They were maneuvering in. And so we were able to coordinate, talking on the radio to helicopters, getting on with artillery. Everyone has call signs, and you were able to all communicate as one big force and do different jobs for the mission to destroy the enemy. So that coordination, that combined arms effort, because artillery goes in first, suppresses the enemy with heavy artillery, that allows you the ability to maneuver, and all these things start happening.
I've heard it compared to like a symphony.
I mean, when you get of higher rank and you start to, when someone hands you a radio for the first time and you're on that with all the other communication, you really start to hear, like, how many moving parts, how much is happening, and when you start to conduct, it really becomes like, you actually, there becomes a point in time where you actually kind of almost put down your rifle, and you're just there with, like your sergeants, staff sergeants, and all the way up to officers and commanders. They're all, on a radio, pop, 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 on the radio, on the radio, on the radio, on the radio, pop, pop, pop. It's more radio than anything else because there's so much coordination that goes into maneuvering your guys, and you have to get with your higher echelon to coordinate the movement of your guys with their guys, and the U.S. is killer at that. We have which is probably one of the biggest reasons why because maneuverability is the most important thing on a battlefield, is to be able to to be able to take ground and move people to different places, suppression, being able to have control of moving your chess pieces. If you can't move your chess pieces because I've got them pinned down, you can't make a move. If I can make all the moves, you're screwed. So maneuverability is huge, and one of the biggest downfalls I think that Russia's faced is that they come in these 40-mile-long convoys that are supposed to make you shake in your boots on a 2-lane road with T-90 tanks, and half of them are out of gas. The maneuver, their coordination of, I mean, the fact that we're this far in and they haven't taken the air is like, how? How have you not taken the air?
Yeah.
It's because the coordination of airfields are taken, then taken back, then taken again, then taken back, and it's just like, well, there's some sort of, and when I say logistical, I don't mean like getting equipment places. I mean logistical as far as like coordinating their arms. There's some kind of hiccup.
Some kind of disconnect.
There's something, yeah. There's somebody's
a lot
not
of
talking
great
to somebody.
musicians, but when they're all in the same room,
It's like somehow their line of communication is, yeah.
So, and that's interesting. And so that's another example. Hey, being a veteran, you know everything that goes into coordination, so you can see like, well, this isn't happening. This has to be due to a lack of this,
Right?
Like, because they have the firepower, but it's like a team that has a bunch of great players that they just no one can get along.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Is that, I mean, even in football, if you're not, if you're all going to get out of the huddle and 3 people don't know the play, it's not happening.
For all over there, like throw the ball.
Like, I have no idea. I'm just going to run where I think is best, and that doesn't win a war.
How much do you? First of all, so we talk about being red-pilled, and black-pilled is where it's like being really cynical, like, hey, I don't trust a word the media says.
Yeah.
Some of the most black-pilled people I know are former military, right? Because they've been there, and they're like, hey, I was in, and Mikhail Buck talked about that. Like, I was there, and I saw this is how it was reported by every single news outlet, and it was complete, total fabrication, so I don't trust any of them.
Yeah.
How much do you watch mainstream news, or if you do, are you taking it like a grain of salt, or just? I've gotten to the point now, Billy, where I'm like, if they're pushing one narrative, believing the opposite will probably get you a lot closer to the truth.
Usually,
I try not to look at the
I don't even watch
media
anymore. Yeah,
but and I look at both sides. You got your CNNs, you got your Fox, and I try to kind of come to a medium of, okay, well, that's BS and that's BS. Well, where is it not BS? So, but the media does blow crap out of proportion, and especially our media right now. We haven't done anything. We haven't supplied Ukraine with anything. We haven't done, but all we've done was to publicize it.
Well,
and is that to get like?
Well, you touched on that, like, because for the military to take action, they need the support of the populace.
Right.
So, like,
Yeah.
Step one is convincing everyone we need.
Right.
If the goal is to do
The ghost
something,
of Kiev is killing everybody. It's okay.
yeah,
Yeah, he's flying airplanes.
is that Putin?
Bomb, bomb, bomb.
I don't know.
And it's like, who's the guy? He's a 65-year-old fighter pilot, just slapped in a MiG and just started bombing people. It's like, no. But what that does is it makes your troops on the ground go like, yes, yes, like with victory, and then that just emboldens them to continue fighting. It's just
We're taking ground.
It's
We're
good.
Advancing. Yeah.
It's necessary. I mean, it happened. John Basilone is like the most famous Marine, arguably ever. But he was a machine
Besides
gunner.
Jordan Riley.
Of course. But he was a machine gunner in World War II, and he was an absolute savage.
Was he on Band of Brothers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they put his character in there. But what ended up happening was after a few tours and after he had all this clout and after he'd done all these incredible things, the Marine Corps in the United States pulled him out and was like, no, you are now the face of the war. You're now going to propagandize for us so that we can have people be like, he's a good-looking young guy, he'd seen a lot of
It
combat.
reminds you of the first Captain America, where he's like selling bonds and dicking blondes.
And there was exactly, I mean, really, and that's what you're doing, is you're just trying to either A, sell the war, or B, raise money. Mm-hmm. And I think that, there's a lot to his story. He's got an incredible... I wish that someone would just do a movie really just solely on John Basilone. You call it Basilone. I want rights to it, but you can just call it Basilone. It'd be a great movie title.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Fully vetted.
Leave Basilone. That's pretty good.
Maybe we should. That should be our next show.
He's kind of old now, though. But
John Basilone?
did he pass away?
Oh, yeah.
I was watching the credits of Band of Brothers.
Yeah, no, yeah, he's long gone.
Okay. No.
I mean, he such a savage that I don't know about all Marines, but I know that when we would do push-ups, if the goal was to do 20 push-ups, or we would do 28 because I was in 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, we'd do 2-8. So if you got in trouble, let's for instance, you did something wrong, you had to do 28 push-ups. But you always had to do 2 extra for 2 different Marines, one for a guy named Chesty Puller and one for John Basilone, because he is that cemented in history because of how incredible he was behind a machine gun. But guys like that were pulled out of the battlefield to literally become that hero Captain America figure that all the troops would hear, like, John Basilone killed 47 Krauts this evening, and blah, blah, blah. And it became
we
like...
have to immortalize this.
Yeah, and then it was like, man, I'm fighting for Johnny. Like, this is, if Johnny did it, and then it became this leader icon that really emboldened the troops to, like, continue fighting, as miserable and hungry and scared as they were. They were like, well, he... and they to give you his backstory, where he was like a young guy from Iowa, and he worked this job. He's a nobody, but look at what he did for us. And then it kind of gives you this idea of, like, I could be the next John. I want to be on the news. I want to be known for. I want to be read in history books, and then you continue to do heroic things.
From Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity. There is a lot of. I mean, which I'm not downplaying that, and I'm not downplaying the importance of that. I'm as the administrator or not the campaign, but the presidential administration who's pushing this war or whatever, you better keep morale up.
Yeah, and it's huge. You have, because especially in 21st century warfare, especially in conventional warfare, which is something that our generation's never watched. We saw 9/11, we saw the invasion of Iraq, we saw Afghanistan, we watched the news, but you've never seen tanks roll into a town and shoot buildings like it was 1940. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, to watch this and to be able to watch it on your TikTok feed and your Instagram feed, and just to literally see 5 minutes after it happened, it's posted, and to geotag it.
It could be getting live streamed. I saw a video of a guy in Ukraine live streaming they got bombed or something.
Yeah, it's one, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people alive today have seen. I mean, most of the people alive today have probably watched Vietnam, and they watched footage of a guy rolling a camera and maybe snippets of things and seeing, bullets flinging through the jungle, but they've never watched conventional warfare, which is a gross, dirty, dirty thing. And conventional warfare, conventional meaning, this is like Vietnam, for instance, was guerrilla warfare. It was somewhat conventional. It was force on force, but conventional warfare means fighter jets against fighter jets, tanks against tanks, infantry against infantry. You're talking about like World War II was conventional warfare. It was a equally capable force against equally capable force fighting each other. Yeah. That there wasn't like, hey, we're meeting at this field union and you better come ready and we're going to all stand on line and just shoot at each other.
Somebody playing a snare.
There's a lot more to it. We have missiles involved. I mean, there were a lot of missiles shot by us in Vietnam, but there weren't a lot of missiles from the they did have some anti-air type things, but it wasn't quite conventional. It was a lot more of a guerrilla style war.
What do you think so you trained people, not Ukraine specifically, but you trained probably their cousins, like their
right. So but obviously we have to train NATO allies. It's our job to stick with NATO.
So what do you think from the Ukrainian side? If you were inside their huddle, what are some of the things they're saying? Like, here's how we're going to do this, or here's how we're going to do that.
Well, one thing is going back to MOS, the military occupational specialty. My job in the infantry was I was a tow gunner, which is the technical term is I was a anti-tank missile gunner, which is the technical term. Thinking. Everybody, we would always just call it tow gunner.
I thought tow gunner. I was thinking of Peyton, because he was talking about how he's shooting weapons with his feet.
Anything with his feet.
So I had to give him a shout out.
Yeah, but so the tow gunner has like 4 weapon systems that they know. That you have your M4, which is like your actual rifle, the 240 Bravo, which is the machine gun that would be mounted up on your turret. You have a Saber system, which shoots the TOW missile, which is what the TOW gunner term comes from. And then the Javelin, which is like everybody knows that because they play Call of Duty and they know what a Javelin is, which is like the thing that goes over the shoulder. You look through the thing, shoot it.
It's not the.
No, you don't actually have to throw it.
It's not the spear
You'd be
threw.
kind of screwed if you tried to throw it. But
I
and
wanna
so
shoot.
my
Can you have access to any of these? Because I want to do that. I want to shoot something.
it's the cool like shooting a missile off your shoulder is probably the coolest thing you
Have
could
you
ever
looked
do
at
in your
ammo
entire life.
prices?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, a Javelin was, if I remember right, it was like 125 grand for a Javelin.
Look, this is awesome.
and if you missed, you'd never shoot again. Your command is never going to give you.
I hope we get views.
That's right. Yeah, that's like our lifetime budget.
Yeah,
for
like you better not
life.
miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we get like 4 of them a year, because that was it. But so when I was at infantry school, one of the, I would say like 25% of my actual jobs training was literally considered armor ID. And so we would look at every single enemy that the United States has. We would learn how to identify from significant markings on the vehicle, whether it's different pieces of equipment, where their oil tank sat, what kind of tracks it had. I mean, you could literally look at an enemy vehicle and know what it was, its capabilities and limitations, its max effective ranges, how many crew members are inside, what kind of rounds it fires. Like literally everything from tanks to BMPs to infantry fighting vehicles to troop carriers to literally anything that you would need to destroy. You had to learn all about it and then get tested on it and pass tests and all that. So one of the big, and some of my buddies right now are like texting me like, bro, dude, like you want to study armor ID with me on Instagram? Like we got,
It sounds a lot.
T90s and
sounds a
T80s.
lot cooler than what in reality you're like.
But one of the weirdest things is that when I was going through infantry school, the T90 was Russia's premier tank. It had the highest level of technology built into it. It was their newest model. I mean, it was so sick that if you locked onto it with like my weapon system, you would lock onto it. It would instantly know. It would know which direction from which it was locked on from. And without the gunner doing anything, the turret would instantly orient in that direction. So if you were
Just
to
stuck with
lock
a
on...
big middle finger is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
So we had to come out with what's called passive targeting, which was a way to shoot it without having to lock onto it and alert it from the fact that you've now locked onto it, because the moment you did... The Javelin's cool because the Javelin shoots, and once it leaves the tube, it's gone, and you don't have to do anything. It automatically tracks and hits the target. But the Saber system, which is a little bit older, has this super thin copper wire that once you shoot it, you actually control the missile. You actually have to kind of fly it, I guess you could call it. And so until the missile hits the target, you can't move. So when that thing is swooping toward you, you're like just sitting there like, it's like a game of chicken, I guess. Yeah. I mean, realistically, it is because I have to sit here and control it until it hits the target. So
there's a lot going on. But
the weird thing is that when they invaded,
yeah,
that T90 was nowhere to be found.
That's what I was going to say. So it's just like with football, you have all their film, but there's no rule that says they have to line up in every formation they did on film.
But imagine starting your second stringers. That's what happened. So the T-72 is like an 80s model. The T-72 was the first tank I saw. When they invaded Ukraine, the T-72 was the first tank I saw, which is like a Cold War era tank. They were flying older MiGs, not the newest MiG, but the older MiGs. So all of the vehicles that I've seen in the beginning of the invasion, the first, let's call it 94 or 96 hours, excuse me. The first 96 hours was all really old shit.
So you were watching TV and you're like, dude.
Yeah, I know what that tank is.
That's an older
tank.
tank.
It's a T-72. It's old as fuck.
They have this
T-90.
T-90, you shoot it and it just does like...
Right, but it was only until they started kind of getting their ass handed to them that I started seeing T-90s roll out. But if I was to do, like, if you think of a military genius, a guy that really knows what he's doing and has some top advisors, and a guy that has a lot of experience and knows how to play the game, why are you starting your fourth line?
Well,
You know what I mean?
my thing, I don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to damage.
He's not trying to turn it into a parking lot.
Right. You know, people are like, he's got his hand on the or his finger on the nuclear button. He's not going to nuke Ukraine. The whole reason for this is so he can export his oil. Why would you contaminate a situation that you're into, that you want to use?
Yeah.
And he's not going to flatten it. I think he wanted to scare tactic them. Say, hey, look, guys, this is my little army. This is my little piece of what I can do to you.
Sure, it could have been that. Like, hey, I'm going to send you my B team, and
Or T90s are crazy expensive, and they're like,
well, but they've already got them. And now they're using them though.
Yeah.
They're using now. All I see are T90s. Now all I see are the newer BMPs. Now all I see are the newer MiGs.
And I think that's why you're seeing the havoc that's being rained down now. You know,
Well,
in the beginning, it wasn't. It was just kind of like, okay, well, the tanks are like you were saying, the tanks are driving through the streets and people riding their bikes and stuff. And then when the big wigs came in, that's when you saw the pictures of the buildings coming down and people running for their lives and stuff.
Yeah.
It became
Well,
real.
one of the things I had to tell a friend of mine today, because he's like, dude, they're you know, did you see that video of the guy driving in his car and the tank turned, shot the car up? I was like, yeah, I saw it. But one of the things, like when we invaded Iraq, and this is not to defend anybody, I'm just coming from a grunt, you know, and I'm the guy in the tank, I'm the guy on the ground invading, coming from just the lower enlisted, the guy that's just there to fight a war. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the powers that be are doing. Coming from that mindset, trying to put myself in their shoes. When we invaded Iraq, we dropped pamphlets. We're like, hey, we're invading. You got like, I'm going to give you like 4 days to get your family out because we don't want to hurt any innocent people. But if you're still here in 4 days, our mission is not peacekeeping. Our mission is not don't fire until fired upon. This is a search and destroy mission.
You either
if
are
you're
dumbass,
here,
crazy, or you're an enemy.
Right. And if you're here, you're a combatant, and I'm going to treat you as such.
Yep.
And the only way to win that war was to do that, was to just say like we can't wait, because it was an unconventional war. So we didn't know who the enemy was. They dressed in plain clothes. They were the goat farmer you just drove by and waved hi to and watched his kids playing soccer, and now all of a sudden he's got an AK. Mm-hmm. So it was a different type of war. In this situation, they're at a point now where if you're still in Ukraine, you're there to defend Ukraine. And so I think they may be taking it as there's a car driving toward us. They've seen IEDs. They've seen vehicle-borne IEDs. They know they've seen that type of warfare. I don't know if it's just self-defense, whether it's good guy or bad guy. It's just at that point, you're a combatant.
My dad always said it's better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. So
Sure.
keep it safe. So yeah, I think in most war, like people think it's going to be over quicker than it's actually.
That was their biggest downfall. They thought it would take 3 days.
2 week flatten.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, how much of that is propaganda? That's, hey guys, this isn't going to be a 5-year war. We're just going to be, would there have been any support for Afghanistan if you knew we were going to be there 20 years?
No.
None. No, I'm not saying anyone had a crystal ball and knew what was going to happen.
No.
But they knew it was going to be a lot longer than what they
But
thought.
once you get involved and you see your friends die, you're willing to stay there longer because you're like, you know what? Like, no. Now I'm sold. Now I'm bought in. And that's the biggest thing, is to get your troops bought in. They have to be sold on the reason why you're there. And whether it's to liberate the Afghanis from the Taliban's control, and maybe you start meeting some people. And of course, you only meet the people who are sympathizers. You're only going to run into the people that are like, yes, I'm here, I'm Ukrainian, but like, go, go, go. And you're like, cool, we have support. And now you're starting to buy into because again, we're talking about propaganda and we're talking about the news media and
a lot of psychological warfare.
and it's the most powerful form of warfare. And we've been experiencing it for 2 years now. Mm-hmm. It's World War III has already started. It's just been fought in a very different way. It's been fought in a very different way.
That was pretty intense.
We are in what I would consider cold World War III. And the problem is that like you don't really know whose side is with you and who's not, because psychological warfare is still warfare. The word's in the name.
I mean, the Cold War.
And we've been dealing with that for years now.
Yeah.
And people have been completely ostracized, and it's been it may not lead to World War III, but the entire world's involved, and it's a level of warfare. So what would you consider that? There's a lot of it's so easy with social media and the internet and technology nowadays to spread that type of. You've heard the terms misinformation and disinformation and all these things, but when you hear those words, that should be a red flag, because that's a code word. It's one of those words that when you start hearing words over and over and over again, and when you start, especially with this war, when you start seeing specific narratives over and over and over and over again, that should be a red flag immediately.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah,
It's
it's like you're trying to by repetition brainwash me into thinking something that maybe I wouldn't normally think.
That was who was the propaganda guy for Nazi Germany? I can't remember. He said something like, if you say
not Goebbels,
Goebbels, yeah,
Goebbels.
Martin Goebbels, yeah, where he's talking about, like, if you say a lie loud enough and long enough,
Yeah.
it becomes a truth. Yeah, it's pretty wild, man. It's
We're living in interesting times. I would argue that I'm glad that I was born in this time,
daggone right.
because better me than my son. You know what I mean? Because I have a chance to where my son is still young enough now to where he will know freedom. He will understand. He will live the life that I did in the 90s, because I will make damn sure of it. But I'm glad it's me.
You bringing back grunge music?
I'm bringing back pop punk. I'm bringing back all of it. But the
That's
thing,
what I'm talking about.
one of the things that I think, especially, and this will kind of resonate with a lot of veterans, whether you were infantry or not. Just you signed up to a force, a group of people who were tasked with a job, and that's national security. And when you leave that, there's a part of national security that becomes like community security. Like, I remember when we talked in the podcast I did with Magician and the Jock, I said something about like when I'm behind a school bus, it's the safest school bus in the county, because I'm just, these kids are safe because I'm here. And whether that's right or wrong or true or not, like, I may not be what I think I am, but if I have that mindset, if I carry that mindset with me everywhere I go, you value yourself as a protector, because I enjoy other people enjoying their time, and I'd rather sit there and, instead of enjoying myself 100% and being carefree and pretending like nothing's going on, I'd rather be 80% enjoying myself and 20% just kind of looking out, just making sure everything's, And there's something about, for a lot of veterans and a lot of people that understand what the Minuteman was in the Revolutionary War, that the Minuteman arguably won the Revolutionary War. It was the carpenter who picked up his hunting rifle and defended his homeland from the greatest superpower known to Earth, the British Army. And what you're watching in Ukraine is a bunch of Minutemen, a bunch of civilians who just said, you know what, give me 2 hours of training and a rifle and I'll die for my country. And they're literally proving it.
And that brings me back to the father of guerrilla warfare, Benjamin Martin.
Okay, yeah.
Patriot.
Oh.
Gibson.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson. Just say Mel Gibson.
But that literally is, it's a great Hollywood example of like somebody who just said, you know what, I can get together a group of people who, when bought into a specific ideal and that have the passion behind them to fight for it, you can't lose. I mean, there's a reason why in every movie they build up the story to the good guy and how great they are, so that you're sold into like, I love this character. There's a struggle, and then the character overcomes it.
The hero's journey.
But no matter what, the good guy always wins, because they're the ones who, inside of their soul, believes wholeheartedly in fighting or dying for their cause.
And it's kind of like your why. It's the home field advantage.
And when you look at it, a lot of these Russian soldiers are not sold on their cause. A lot of them are like, why the fuck are we doing
I can
this?
see the advantages of it, but am I willing to die for it? But if it's like
For
hey,
what?
this
So
is
that
your
we can
hometown.
gain another couple 100 miles of land? And you know what? You can't even argue that it was, oh, because they wanted to join NATO and we don't want NATO so close to our borders. I was in Latvia, 15 miles from the border of Russia, and Latvia is a NATO ally. Poland is NATO. They're on the border of Russia. You can't argue that Ukraine is a strategic point to buffer NATO from Russia because there's plenty of other countries that border Russia.
Right, but my take on that is that is a direct route. Those other
Sure.
places are not a direct route. So when you get that direct route with the sanctions of NATO, now you're handicapping. So of course that's going to be. I mean, they're one of the largest oil distributors now.
But you see, the sanctions didn't hit the oil, I don't believe.
What's that?
I don't think a lot of the sanctions, the oil was excluded, right?
Not with
I think that
NATO.
happened today. Today.
Oh,
I think he shut off all that shit today.
Who did? Shut up.
Our guy.
Oh, that guy shut up all the sanctions.
Ice cream man.
Oh,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But it's never as simple as this. It's kind of like the last straw.
Right, but when they say no, we're justifying this because we don't want NATO near our country. That's because that was the first narrative they pushed. Was like, oh,
Yeah,
we just don't want NATO near our country.
yeah.
And then
but,
it's like, well, no, you got like 3 other ones near your country.
yeah, but my take on it,
Near our pipelines.
yeah, it's-
That and then here comes the truth
Yeah.
behind it.
yeah, and
Or-
it's all about the dollar, like we talked about.
Yeah.
But in war comes great value.
Mhm.
So I mean, that was to me in my head, it's 100%. And if it's not, then they're lying to us about the prices of oil. Like,
Well, to
oh,
go back to and I know we didn't hit on it the way you asked it, but to go back to we were talking about news agencies and the narrative and hearing the stories and propaganda and stuff like that. If you're getting your information from a 3-letter agency or a 3-letter news group or anything with for some reason 3 letters, you might as well add 3 because it's all part of the same evil that shouldn't be going on right now. You have to find some sort of alternative news source because you can say that like, okay, well, one is on the left, one is on the right. And so if you just find the middle ground, like I agree, find the middle ground but both sides are propaganda. No matter what ideals
that's why
you
the
have.
Daily Wire is so great.
Yeah, but even then, you can argue that the Daily Wire is leaning
Yeah.
more to the right. What you have to understand is that no matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, both sides are putting out the same amount of propaganda. You just might identify more with one and agree with one, and that sounds more like truth, and it probably is. Some of these, and I agree with you, like people like the Daily Wire put out a lot of truth. But again, they're coming from a lens.
We're all subject to bias.
Exactly. Everybody's going to read that and say like, and I only say that because like I know I feel like I have a good filter of where like I know what the truth is. So even if I see somebody on one side put out some truth and it's not truth and they're even on my side, I can kind of still say like, come on, y'all, like don't stoop that low. Don't go to their level. Don't do what they're doing. But it's the actual independent. There's a lot of really great independent news sources, especially like if you're on Instagram. There's a Marine veteran who goes under the handle of Northern Provisions, puts out real, on the ground, actual actionable intelligence that really is actual truth. And when you read this stuff, neither side of our 3-letter news spectrum is saying. It's the actual truth, and no matter what you do, if you find your news on the television, you're watching a show. It's programming.
Yeah, the tough part about alternative news is they still have to build a following.
Of course.
They have to.
And not enough people
out
are going to get
there-
that news.
It's like atheism. We have no religion. No, that is your religion.
Right. It is absolutely a
You
religion.
get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it is tough, especially when you got guys like me. I'm not qualified to. Like, you could have bullshitted me this entire time.
Sure.
I would have. There's not enough time in the day for me to do the.
Well, and I'm sure there's
research
geopolitical
necessary.
experts that could probably tear me apart on everything I say. I'm just coming from what I've deciphered from
Your
a military
interpretation of it.
background as what I see happening. And what I'm seeing is not just what's actually happening on the ground, because what you're watching is combat footage. I mean, you're watching combat footage, and you can
you
pick
guys
apart
do
all
that
that
again?
stuff.
Okay.
But you can pick apart all that stuff. You
Sure.
can say like, why are they rushing this hill like that? Why would you this, that, and whatever. But when you see the spin, when you start to see the trends of, like you said earlier, why all of a sudden is this president of this tiny country that no one's ever cared about, all of a sudden is like this hero figure. And you're like, probably because someone made him the hero figure. And whether it's his country who is trying to have them back their leader and trying to embolden their troops to be like, this is our leader, he's for us. And it could not be for the world stage. It could just be for his troops. And it could be for that. But what the rest of the world's media is doing is they're taking a guy who was legitimately, before he was president, was an actor. He was an actor on television. And they're taking him and all of a sudden making him this, like, now he's wearing a plate carrier. It's like the picture of the woman, AOC, whatever, at the fence at the border where she was on her knees, like, sobbing. And you're like, I would have loved to have seen the video of that 10 seconds prior to that picture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, come on. It's the most staged shit I've ever seen.
And James Cummings talked about that. Only that which perfectly divides us is going to get media attention.
Of course.
Right? There's a media head, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm a media head, that's what I'm doing.
And that's the thing about PSYOPs, psychological operations. It's brilliant people conducting brilliant operations.
Because there has to be a sprinkle of truth.
You know why he's a hero.
Oh, yeah.
He cured COVID.
Oh, yeah. just vanished when they got invaded.
What did James say? We got a 30-second commercial, and then it's like from COVID to now war.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this has been...
But you have to question that, too. You have to question that, too. As if you look at it from a global perspective, how did we go from one crisis straight into the next?
No, that's what I'm saying.
And you have to question, like, well, of course it's convenient. It's like, wow, how is that convenient? And then the financial crisis that comes from this crisis is also going to be convenient. I'm calling it now. It's like this is going to lead to a United States economic crisis. And then what kind of freedoms get taken away when that happens? Because 9/11 happened, and how many freedoms did you lose? You can't go through the airport security without someone seeing your breasts on a TV monitor.
What do they say? There's nothing more.
There's no privacy after that.
Nothing more permanent than a temporary government solution. But
Yeah.
man, we could go on this. I mean, for eternity. We probably gonna have to do a part 2 on this. But
Yeah, this is like, I love talking about this stuff and getting I can get a little fired up. That's why I've been a little quiet and sitting back, because I can.
Billy's a huge Putin fan.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
I'm not.
Привет.
Billy,
I'm not, but I don't understand why we automatically made this guy a hero, and why we automatically. Well, I know why.
Well, because look who is in bed with that country, who has Burisma and all of the business dealings over there, who's making a fortune off of Ukraine.
I'm just
Is
waiting.
that the one with the laptop?
I mean, there was a
waiting for,
couple.
like, a little
There
red
was like a
dot
couple
to be-
laptops. I've heard of losing a laptop, but losing 2 laptops is kind of
Yeah.
like a. Come on, dude, you're having
When
a
you're-
little
when
hard
you're
time
coked
there.
out of your head.
Yeah.
They're
anyway.
tough
So,
to-
I mean,
they're
it-
tough
it-
to keep up with. You got to hold on to them.
Yeah, it is. But again, you just have to question it. I mean, whether you want to, but you have to understand that, like, no matter, like I said before, is that I think the leadership on both sides are bad, but I think the people that are fighting for the right thing, the people that are in their community, that are the modern day Minuteman, the guy standing up for his country and his town and his family, and the buildings that he used to go do business in that he's watching fall to rubble. Those people are really good people doing really good things. I think that the hand of God is on them.
Yeah. There is a. I remember I had a Coach Holtz, who always say, "Look, it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems."
Right.
And that's true in anything, and that's proven so true in my life. But it's proven true with COVID. It's proven true with blah blah blah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom what James was saying. What can perfectly divide us is what's going to get the absolute most wall to wall attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna see this is more polarizing than ever. I don't know how anything could be more polarizing than COVID. Like, you could tell who someone voted for by did they have a mask on or not. It's crazy how tribal we are, which is just a natural thing.
Oh, it's divide and conquer.
But I'm already seeing people with flying Ukrainian flags.
Yeah.
It's just so much.
My biggest problem is the same people who say I stand with Ukraine didn't stand for their own kids at their own schools for the past 2 years.
That they probably
You know
Push
what I
the
mean?
bike,
So
so
what do you what? Well, I
get 'em
think
an
I
extra
think
mask.
we're reaching a point in time on the road we've been on where it's about to turn into a Y intersection, and we're either going to go left or right. And I think we're about at the time where you need to figure out what you truly stand for, because the Ukrainians didn't have long, or they had plenty of time because maybe they've known of this issue for a long time. But when the decision had to be made, it had to be made on the spot. Am I staying or am I leaving? Am I fighting or am I surrendering? I think for a lot of us, this is a little closer to home than you realize, and I think that you might need to figure out where you truly stand. It's not about the blue check mark on Instagram and your clout. Where do you truly stand when it's in your community and when it's really happening to you? Where are you? What do you stand for?
I think we're in that weak men create.
No, it's the strong men create good times.
I
Good
know
times create
we're
weak
we're
men.
in that circle, that process where
Yeah.
weak men create bad times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
Yeah, we're gonna go through some bad times.
yeah.
but I tell you
And
what,
I think
shit-
right now people are complaining about $5 diesel. We're on the Titanic and we haven't even hit the iceberg yet.
Hey, the lobster was happy on the Titanic.
Yeah.
Enjoy the decline.
I would just say one of the biggest things, especially for other veterans, is that the modern day Minuteman is a real thing. And I think that if you have any form of training or any level of preparedness, or you have even the mindset of wanting to learn, that's something that I'm really passionate about. Is just
Bring your ass on this show.
it's. I mean, yeah, or
Come on,
or
let's
like
talk
or
about
like I'll do free classes if with the limited knowledge I have. If you want to learn, I mean, anything. I love teaching the idea of being able to protect yourself, your family. I mean, you have the inherent right to self-preservation and the preservation of your community. And if somebody invades that community, man, if you want to learn how to use a rifle, you hit me up. Hit me.
And with that being said, we did talk about doing some Magician the Jock military training.
We did. I think
Right.
I cannot wait.
Even just basic medical training, because a lot of these civilians that are not combatives, if you run upon somebody who needs medical training, if you want to learn, you got to learn how to. Applying a tourniquet's the easiest damn thing you could ever imagine, but like nobody, that should be taught in high school, because it's the number one most life-saving tool you get, even in job sites and stuff. I mean, tourniquets, it's stuff like that is just like, as civilians, you want to be a successful country, having civilians that have this knowledge between whether it's fire, everyone has a job, but firearms, medical, everybody has these skills. If you all have the baseline skills of this stuff, you can be David and beat Goliath. And I think we're watching it kind of happen right now. A
Yeah,
little bit.
I always talk about men. You want to be civilized, but have a high capacity for violence, right? You have to have that. We have a lot of civilized guys that
Yeah.
have no capacity for violence. They're harmless.
Yeah.
It's like what Jordan Peterson talks
Jordan
about.
Peterson,
the rabbit.
yeah,
The
the whole
rabbit's
thing.
not moral. He's harmless.
Yeah,
Like we need.
that doesn't make you good.
No, it makes you.
Just makes
it
you harmless.
prey,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson, that was one of my favorite quotes of his because of that. Whole, I mean, you should be an absolute monster, but have it under voluntary control. I think so too, because it really truly does. Because when someone comes in your front door with, I mean, I've watched videos recently of it, of two guys with hard hats and reflective vests on at somebody's front door. When you look through your peephole, you're like, oh, they must be doing work on my street. You open the door, boom. You know, what are you
That's
gonna do?
kind of scary.
What are you gonna do?
All right, take
But-
us home.
Take us home,
Yeah.
brother. This has
All
been
right.
awesome.
Well,
man.
it has been awesome.
Thank you
We'll
for having
do
me
part
on.
two. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is this is a lot to unpack, and that's the thing is, like, again, I'm coming from a very limited mindset. I know what I know, and I can kind of like give my take on things. It's mostly opinion, but guys, thanks for watching. It was a cool conversation. I appreciate y'all doing this one. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Billy, on the ones and twos.
And we're out.
That's it.